Welcome to the debate. Between 1993 and 2021, the number of administrators on American college campuses exploded by 164%.
Yeah, it's a massive jump.
Right. And at the exact same time, the number of secure, tenured teaching jobs just plummeted. So, if you're a parent writing a $40,000 tuition check this fall, you probably assume that money is going directly to, the brilliant minds teaching your kid.
You would think so, yeah.
You would, but the data from Jonathan H. Westover's comprehensive analysis shows a very different reality. That money is increasingly funding an army of managers, compliance officers, and administrative dashboards.
Oh, absolutely.
Today, your local university is likely run more like a Fortune 500 company than a traditional sanctuary of learning. So the central question we are unpacking today is this. Did this infusion of corporate logic and market efficiency fundamentally destroy the soul of higher education? Or is it, the absolute only thing keeping the doors open?
It is the ultimate organizational stress test. We are looking at institutions that were, let's be real, designed in the Middle Ages.
Right.
And they are trying to survive the economic realities of the 21st century.
And I will be arguing that this systemic transformation into what Westover calls the all-administrative university is an existential threat. By adopting a purely corporate DNA, universities are commodifying the act of learning. They're exploiting their instructional faculty as gig workers, basically.
Right.
And we are completely abandoning the long-term knowledge-generating mission that makes them valuable to society in the first place.
Well, in my perspective, which is drawn directly from the other side of Westover's research, is that integrating market responsiveness and data-driven accountability, it isn't some malicious betrayal of academic ideals.
Okay.
It is a necessary, vital evolution. When you are facing massive demographic shifts and crippling financial deficits, operational efficiency is not the enemy of the academic mission. It is the survival mechanism that allows that mission to continue at all.
Well, let's ground this in exactly what this corporate transformation actually looks like on the ground. Because it's not just a shift in the tone of the university president's emails.
No, definitely not.
Right. We are talking about a radical, intentional restructuring of the academic workforce. The traditional model of a university, it relied on tenure-track faculty.
Yeah, the classic professors.
Exactly. Professors who had the academic freedom and job security to pursue difficult, long-term research and to invest deeply in their students over years. But according to the material, the proportion of contingent faculty, meaning part-time instructors and adjuncts working contract to contract, it rose from 47% in 1993 to a staggering 68% by 2021.
It's a huge shift.
It is. And meanwhile, faculty growth overall was only 92%, compared to that 164% explosion in administrative roles we mentioned. We have created a system that optimizes purely for revenue and administrative control. It treats the student as a consumer and the professor as a disposable cost center.
The numbers are stark. There is no denying that. But we have to look at the mechanics of why that shift occurred. University boards didn't just wake up one morning and decide to play corporate CEO for the fun of it.
Well, some might argue they did.
Maybe some, but broadly, they were forced into this posture by undeniable compounding crises. Look at the data on state disinvestment.
Okay.
Between 1990 and 2020, state appropriations per full-time student declined by 37% in inflation-adjusted terms.
That is a big drop.
It's massive. The public funding that used to float these institutions simply evaporated, and that is just the financial side. We are also staring down the barrel of a demographic enrollment cliff.
Right, the 2025 cliff.
Exactly. Because birth rates plummeted during the 2008 financial crisis, universities are projecting a 15% drop in traditional college-age students between 2025 and 2029.
Yeah.
So if your funding is cut by a third and your customer base shrinks by 15%, you just cannot run your institution the way you did in 1985.
I hear that.
If an institution cannot balance its books, it closes. Applying business logic and operational efficiency is what prevents a total institutional collapse.
But we have to ask, what exactly is surviving that collapse? And,
Who is paying the price for this so-called operational efficiency?
Fair point.
The absolute cornerstone of the corporatized university is the pervasive precarious of its instructional workforce. Let's talk about the adjunct reality.
Okay.
These are the people teaching the majority of freshman and sophomore classes, right? And they are earning anywhere from $2,700 to $3,500 per course.
Yeah, it's very low.
It's practically nothing. If you teach 4 classes a semester, you are making maybe $20-something thousand a year. Westover highlights a terrifying statistic here. 31% of adjunct faculty rely on public assistance.
Wow, 31%?
Yes, that means we have people holding PhDs who are grading college essays, who literally qualify for food stamps. And this isn't just a labor grievance. This mechanically degrades the education. Research by Ehrenberg and Zhang shows that for every 10% increase in part-time faculty, graduation rates actually drop.
Wait, why would graduation rates drop just because the instructor is part-time? I mean, a good teacher's a good teacher, right?
Because education requires infrastructure and sustained connection. A freeway-flying adjunct who is teaching at 3 different community colleges, they don't have an office to hold office hours.
Right.
They aren't on campus to notice when a freshman starts skipping class because of, say, mental health issues. They aren't around for 3 years to write a meaningful letter of recommendation or mentor a student through a senior thesis. When you rely on transient labor, the safety net for struggling students just vanishes. You lose the sustained mentoring that actually gets students across the finish line.
I acknowledge the severity of the adjunct crisis. The working conditions for many contingent faculty are entirely unsustainable. But I come at it from a different way. I would argue the solution to that crisis isn't to reject corporate efficiency, it's to apply it correctly.
Oh, so?
Well, financial prudence doesn't automatically require a casualized labor force. Let's look at Purdue University as a counterexample.
Okay.
Between 2013 and 2027, Purdue pulled off something practically unheard of in higher education. They implemented a 14-year tuition freeze.
A 14-year freeze? That's wild.
Right. They kept resident undergraduate costs below $10,000 annually, and they didn't accomplish this by starving their faculty. Over that exact same period, they maintained 2 to 2.5% annual faculty salary increases.
Interesting.
Yeah. They prove that if you utilize strategic program prioritization, if you manage your physical assets efficiently, and if you grow your enrollment smartly, operational efficiency can completely coexist with faculty investment.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. You cannot use Purdue's 14-year tuition freeze as a victory for corporate efficiency without looking at the underlying math.
What do you mean?
Amidst massive inflation, by the way, and simultaneously raise employee salaries unless the money's coming from somewhere else.
Well, they grew their enrollment.
Did they pack 500 students into every freshman lecture? Did they aggressively expand their highly profitable online arm, Purdue Global, to subsidize the physical campus? My point is that relying on gig labor and massive online scaling for academia, it's exactly like running a hospital entirely staffed by freelance transient nurses hired shift by shift.
Okay, I follow the analogy.
Sure, it makes the spreadsheet look fantastic for the quarter because you only pay for exactly the hours you need. But it destroys the institutional memory, the collaborative environment, and the continuity of care required for the hospital to actually heal patients.
Yeah, I see your point.
Education requires that same continuity. When 68% of your instructional staff might not have a contract next semester, the academic community just breaks down.
You're focusing heavily on how the faculty are treated, which is important, but a university's ultimate responsibility isn't just to employ teachers. It's to graduate students without burying them in debt.
True.
Let's look at how these administrative dashboards and corporate tools actually serve the student. We are currently facing a $1.7 trillion student debt crisis in this country.
Yeah, it's an astronomical number.
It is. When 18-year-olds are taking on mortgage-sized loans for a degree, demanding accountability and measurable educational outcomes is not some corporate distortion. It is a fundamental moral imperative. If you are going to charge these prices, you must use every tool available to prove you are delivering a return on that investment.
But that obsession with an immediate, measurable return on investment, that is the exact mechanism that standardizes and dilutes the education itself.
How so?
When you run a university like a factory, You only value what you can measure on a quarterly dashboard. Westover notes a 30% decline in humanities majors.
Yeah, the humanities have taken a big hit.
Huge hit. Entire departments, history, philosophy, literature, they are being gutted because they don't produce an immediate high-salary vocational credential that looks good on an alumni outcome report.
But employers want hard skills.
Do they? Because liberal arts cultivate critical thinking, ethical reasoning, and the ability to parse complex information. Those are the exact attributes employers constantly say they want in leadership.
That is true. They do ask for soft skills.
Right. But by forcing education into a corporate accountability framework, universities are sacrificing the long-term intellectual flexibility of our students for narrow, short-term vocational training.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Let's look at what purpose-driven accountability actually achieves in practice, because the data tells a very different story about these administrative tools. Look at Georgia State University.
Okay, Georgia State.
They utilize the exact corporate mechanisms you are criticizing: predictive analytics, data-driven advising, centralized dashboards. They didn't use these tools to cut humanities. They used them to track hundreds of risk factors to intervene when students were struggling.
But how exactly does a corporate dashboard save a struggling student? I mean, really?
By replacing passive observation with active, data-driven intervention.
Okay.
Think about it. If a first-generation student fails their first calculus quiz, or they drop a prerequisite course, or even if they just stop logging into the campus portal, the system automatically flags it.
So it's like a surveillance system?
Well, it's a support system. An academic advisor is immediately notified, and they reach out within 24 hours to offer tutoring or maybe financial aid adjustments. They systemize student success the way a corporation systemizes supply chain logistics.
And what was the actual result of that?
The result? Georgia State increased their graduation rates by 23 percentage points.
Oh, wow.
And more importantly, they completely eliminated racial and income achievement gaps.
Really? Completely eliminated them?
Yes. Black, Hispanic, and low-income students now graduated the exact same rate or higher than the overall student body. They achieved this by using corporate-style data analytics to ensure they were actually fulfilling their mission for all students, not just the privileged ones who already knew how to navigate a traditional academic bureaucracy.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. Because Georgia State's success in closing those equity gaps is incredible. There's no denying that.
Right.
But if you look closely at Westover's analysis of why they succeeded where so many other corporatized universities fail, it actually undermines the standard corporate model.
How does it undermine it?
Well, Georgia State worked specifically because it utilized faculty-led task forces. The faculty maintained curricular authority over how those analytics were used. They were the ones who designed the interventions, like the Panther retention grants.
Sure.
That is robust shared governance in action. It is the exact opposite of the top-down all-administrative university where managers just impose metrics on the faculty from the outside.
But why does it matter who pushes the button as long as the student gets helped?
Because of a concept Westover calls academic anomie.
Anomie.
Yeah, anomie essentially means a total breakdown of shared purpose and social norms. When accountability is imposed top-down by administrators who have never even taught a class, it generates immense resistance.
I can see that. Faculty don't like being told what to do by non-academics.
Exactly. A professor stops seeing themselves as an educator trusted to shape minds, and they start seeing themselves as a gig worker just trying to hit a KPI target to keep their job. They start teaching to the metric.
Yeah.
When faculty lead the analytics, it works. When corporate managers impose them, you get academic anomia, which destroys the very fabric of the institution.
But those educators at Georgia State still had to embrace the analytics. They had to accept that measuring outcomes actually matters. And this brings us to the most urgent point, which is the literal survival of these institutions.
Okay, survival.
You talk about the philosophical value of the humanities and the dangers of academic anomia. But philosophy doesn't keep the lights on.
It doesn't pay the electric bill.
Exactly. Small colleges and regional public universities are facing an existential threat right now. If they stand still, if they cling to a traditional model that ignores market demands and operational efficiency, they will simply die.
And my concern is that in their desperation not to die, they are mutating into something entirely unrecognizable. To survive, these universities engage in what we call revenue diversification.
which is just smart business. I mean, you don't rely on a single income stream.
But look at how they do it. It's like a bookstore realizing people aren't buying enough books.
Okay.
So they start selling coffee. Then they add a section for electronics, then clothing, until one day you walk in and realize the books are just decoration for a shopping mall.
That's a little dramatic, don't you think?
But that is what universities are doing. They build massive luxury dorms with lazy rivers.
The lazy rivers are a bit much, I'll admit.
They expand into real estate development. They pour millions into auxiliary enterprises and massive sports complexes. And to keep the tuition dollars flowing, they treat student satisfaction as the ultimate metric.
Right.
When your primary goal is 5-star customer reviews from 18-year-olds, you inevitably sideline intellectual risk-taking. You get rampant grade inflation because, the customer is always right.
Yeah, that is a risk.
If the material is too hard, the customer complains, the reviews go down, and the adjunct professor gets fired. The university loses its fundamental DNA as a generator of long-term knowledge, and it just becomes a high-end property management company that hands out credentials.
You can critique the lazy rivers all day, but let's look at institutions that used radical restructuring to actually save their core academic mission.
Like who?
Take Sweetbriar College. In 2015, their board literally voted to close the institution due to insurmountable financial insolvency. They were dead.
Right, I remember that.
But they saved themselves. How? By operating like a nimble corporation. They radically redesigned their curriculum, sweeping away dozens of siloed, traditional majors and replacing them with an interdisciplinary core focused on 21st century women's leadership. They right-sized their faculty to match their actual enrollment, and they diversified their revenue through strategic partnerships.
Yeah, but they fired a massive portion of their tenured faculty to do that.
They did, which is incredibly painful, but the alternative was firing everyone and locking the gates forever.
I suppose that's true.
Or look at the other end of the spectrum, Arizona State University, ASU. Under the leadership of Michael Crow, ASU decided to embrace scale rather than exclusivity.
Yeah, they're massive now.
Huge. They scaled their enrollment to over 150,000 students through massive online and hybrid innovations. They collapsed traditional academic departments into interdisciplinary schools designed around solving real-world problems.
Right.
And contrary to your fear that market scale causes mission drift, ASU actually dramatically improved their academic research output. And they maintained a proportional full-time faculty workforce while doing it. Adaptation to the market isn't a betrayal of the mission, it is mission survival. They redefined who could access a top-tier research university, and they used corporate scale to achieve it.
I will concede that Arizona State is a fascinating model, but in the landscape of American higher education, they are the exception that proves the rule.
You think so?
I do. ASU managed to scale while maintaining a core of full-time faculty. The vast majority of corporatized institutions attempt to mimic that scale simply by hiring an army of precarious adjuncts and building a massive administrative bureaucracy to manage them. Westover's analysis makes a critical point about what actually sustains an institution long-term: psychological contracts.
Meaning the implicit expectations between the employer and the employee?
Exactly. It's the unspoken agreement that if a faculty member dedicates their life, their research, and their passion to an institution, the institution will support their intellectual pursuit. It won't just treat them as seasonal labor to be discarded when enrollment dips.
Yeah.
It's the implicit trust between the university, its faculty, and its students. If we want to build true long-term resilience, we cannot just look at the balance sheet.
We do have to look at the balance sheet, though.
Yes, but we have to reprioritize shared governance. We have to build sustainable faculty staffing models, and we must value long-term educational integrity over short-term efficiency metrics. A dashboard can measure retention, but it cannot measure the expansion of a human mind.
That is beautifully said, but I would counter that educational philosophy is a luxury you can only afford if you are solvent. Market pressures, demographic cliffs, and state defunding are undeniable realities. Rejecting business logic entirely because it feels too corporate is a stance that higher education simply cannot afford anymore.
So we just accept the corporate model?
The institutions that are actually thriving right now, like ASU, Purdue, and Georgia State, they prove that when you deploy purpose-driven accountability, you don't destroy the university. When you integrate market responsiveness with your academic mission, you actually become more resilient, you become more equitable, and you become far more capable of serving the modern student who desperately needs a degree that holds actual value in a highly competitive real world.
We clearly disagree on whether the corporate influence is a cure or a disease.
but I think we can acknowledge a vital point of convergence in Westover's material.
Definitely.
The current tension between these two forces is entirely unsustainable. It requires a deliberate, intentional recalibration of the relationship between the administrative apparatus, the faculty who actually do the educating, and the market forces they both face.
Absolutely. The false binary between pure academic values on one side and ruthless financial sustainability on the other, it has paralyzed too many institutions. Both sides have to come to the table and recognize the realities of the other.
There is incredibly rich nuance in Jonathan H. Westover's analysis regarding specific governance models, alternative funding mechanisms, and ways to renew the liberal arts without losing institutional solvency. We highly encourage our listeners to explore the source material further, to form their own conclusions on where that balance lies.
There is definitely more to dig into, especially regarding how data can be leveraged to actually support faculty rather than just surveil them.
Exactly. Next time you walk across a university campus, look past the ivy and the historic brick architecture. Look at the people working there and ask yourself, what kind of engine is really running inside, and who is being asked to fuel it?